Yes.
Just let him know.
And I'm not going to cut or anything, so
Okay.
we'll just keep going. We'll just edit out all the bits that we need to
Gotcha.
restart or whatever.
Okay.
So yeah, and you'll be looking at me, not the camera, except for this one point when I'm going to ask you to look in the camera and introduce yourself. Tell us what grade and the lesson that was just taught.
Okay.
And you can even throw the school in there too if you want.
Okay. I am Denise Coverley Paxton, and I teach 5th grade at Lena Juniper Elementary School in Sparks, Nevada. And my class just conducted a lesson, a Socratic discussion on the idea of reparations for slavery.
All right. Okay, we'll start here. So I'm going to read these questions pretty robotically.
Okay.
Everyone gets asked the same, and they should match up with
Yes.
the questions that you had there. We want to understand. What's that?
I'm sorry,
Oh.
the door's open.
Oh.
We're still taping in here. We're not in here. There, Miss Caskey. Sorry. My custodian.
Alrighty. So we want to understand the decisions you made in planning for this lesson and how it fits into the unit and year. So how does this lesson connect to and build on students' prior skills and knowledge? What was taught before this lesson and what will come after it?
At the beginning of the school year, I have my students working in a government unit, as well as during our science time, scientific inquiry. And through those two units, they develop the understanding of rules, laws, and principles. We also look at documents like the Declaration of Independence, the Preamble to the Constitution, and the Bill of Rights. And we pull in John Locke's idea of state of nature versus common good. Then in December, with the anniversary of Pearl Harbor, we have a short unit on Pearl Harbor in Executive Order 9066. With that, we focus on the Fifth Amendment with due process. We did a structured academic controversy on Korematsu versus United States, a Supreme Court case. And we also had a Socratic discussion on individual rights versus national security. Right now, we're currently studying the American colonies and slavery. We also visited the idea of racism and what racism is so the students can make the connection of the effects of slavery, or within the text, they called it the legacy of slavery, throughout American history to Black Americans today. So our lesson on reparations of slavery deals with the history of slavery and the struggles of African Americans throughout history, even today, and making that connection with what events happened in the past still can have effects. Here we are over 200 years later. The document that was provided for them for the discussion showed both sides to the question. And then after this, we will continue with our unit on American colonies, where we are studying how the geography of the American colonies helped create the culture for each of the 3 regions of the colonies. And of course, we've looked at how slavery was much more prevalent in the southern colonies due to the need for a labor workforce on the large plantations.
Excellent. Those all sound like really tough subjects to
Yes.
debate and talk about. Those are good. All right.
I gotta stick in here that I'm amazed that 5th graders can deal with this complex
Yeah, right.
content.
All right. Is the text used in this lesson part of a sequence of texts designed to build skills and knowledge? If so, please give examples of other texts that form the sequence.
It's not part of a sequence, but it is part of a close read format that we've been using throughout the year. And within that format, I am targeting specific reading literacy strategies, as well as writing within the content.
All right, so we're going to talk about the standards. Talk about the standards targeted in this lesson. And what did you do to make the lesson fully reflect the intent of that standard?
This lesson hits a ton of Common Core state standards as well as the Nevada State Social Studies standards. As far as the Common Core English Language Arts literacy standards, the students are quoting from the text using evidence. They're doing that within the activities before the discussion, where they are locating evidence, categorizing evidence, and then during the discussion, discussing the evidence, and then within the final assessment, where they need to cite evidence to support their claim. They see with that text, the text shows both sides, and so they are able to pull in an idea of reparation and seeing both sides to that question. It also focuses on academic words within the content vocabulary, and some of the questions within the close read are designed to target some of those vocabulary words. They have multiple accounts with the text. Their discussion today was, I think we totaled a number of 6 times that the students have accessed the text. So they're extremely familiar with it, building each time on the knowledge from their previous access to the text. Again, it's evidence-based within the text. The discussion model, the Socratic discussion, allows them to discuss and use what they've learned within the close read. And then, of course, the opinion writing at the end, which is the final assessment.
Excellent. Which of the core action indicators do you think this lesson best exemplifies, and why?
I think it hits all the core action pretty in depth. For instance, the first core action, it has a ATOS level of 9th grade, 8th month. And so I'm using a very high level text with a 5th grade level class. So it has very high text complexity. The second core action, the questions that within the close read are text dependent as well as text specific. All the questions focus on the idea of reparations, what it is, and then both sides to it. It builds on vocabulary and then has discussion within it. The third core action, it's a close read, begins as a close read where they're collecting evidence, categorizing the evidence. They learn a paraphrase writing activity. Throughout the entire lesson, which is about a 5-day lesson, they're working individually, they're working with partners, and then they work in their small groups during the discussion and then go back to individual work. So all students are allowed to have multiple access and support within the text.
All right, so moving on to the next section here. It's pretty good. So we are interested in how the shifts required by the CCSS are being incorporated into your instruction. So discuss how this lesson illustrates the shifts required by the CCSS.
Well, like I've already stated, the lesson definitely connects with all 3 of the shifts, of the core action shifts. And these shifts have helped me in guiding my instruction. I believe that before I was aware of Common Core, I was still doing a lot of these techniques, but the core action and the shifts have just allowed me to have more structure to where when I'm planning my lesson and have more purpose, a specific purpose in hitting all of those shifts.
All right. So how did you teach the content of this lesson prior to the CCSS? What is the same and what is different?
I am in the 3rd year of a 3-year vertical where we're working with the Mendive history, or our middle school history teachers, as well as the IB history teachers, where we are being trained in Common Core. Last year, I used the same text for the Socratic discussion without using it as a close read. And my students had a really hard time understanding the content and being able to access and use the reasoning. I found that they were able to find evidence within the text that answers the essential question, but they weren't able to put together a reasoning piece on why that evidence was chosen. This year, because it's my third year working with Common Core, I added that close read with the text-dependent and text-specific questions and the multiple access for the students to have with the text, and they were much more prepared. They had a much deeper understanding of the text, and they were able to express that in their reasoning and then hopefully within the assessment of the writing.
All right. So student engagement is critical to the work, student engagement is crucial to the work of the CCSS. We want to understand how you ensured that all students had the opportunity to productively engage in the work of the lesson. So how did you support all students in working with grade level text? Did you provide scaffolding for students below grade level? And how did you create opportunities for students who are advanced to engage more deeply?
The first access that students had to the text was a vocabulary lesson where they are able to pre-read the vocabulary that I have highlighted within the text that I felt was essential for them to understand, to be able to understand the text. So they look at that vocabulary and they categorize it within 4 categories. I've heard it before, it's new to me, I've heard it but I have no idea how to use it, and I'm an expert on this word. And so that's their first access. So depending on whatever level they're within their with their vocabulary, their reading vocabulary and their literacy, would depend on how many words they have in each box. And then we go back and we then look at those words that are in the box where they don't understand the meaning of the word, and they're able to use, on the right hand column of the text, I have the definitions or meanings for those words. So then they can make those connections. The second access that they had to the text was I read the text aloud for them. So that allows for all students to, I'm able to model the fluency of reading as well as pronunciation of unknown words. After that, they then annotated the text. And so all students are annotating the text based on where they are in their understanding of the text. And then their next access to the text was they individually were working on the text and answering the text-dependent questions. Then I had them go into their small groups, and the small groups would discuss the answers. And then we went whole class. So again, allowing for that building and that scaffolding. Their next access was they were paired with a partner of pretty equal literacy, and they went through and they found evidence that connected with the idea of reparations for slavery, and then they created categories within that evidence. Students that are below grade level in their literacy, I had paired, and then I worked much closely with them, and also even some I gave them a specific section within the text to look at instead of the entire text. When they were then getting ready for the Socratic discussion, they worked individually on collecting evidence and writing 4 questions that they'd like to ask about the text. With my students that are in my intervention groups, so they're below grade level, and my special ed and ESL students, if needed, I then assign them a specific text, a section within the text to focus on to collect their evidence and their questions. I found that with those students, a large text, this is a 3-page text, and they become so overwhelmed with it, even though they've worked with it multiple times. So giving them that small section allows them to come to the discussion and feel confident and comfortable in what they're going to be sharing.
Excellent. All right. How do you know that students were able to successfully respond to text-dependent questions and tasks with precision? Did students acquire the literacy skills addressed in this lesson? And what did you do for students who did not acquire the literacy skills addressed in this lesson?
When they were first working on their text-dependent questions, I realized that one of the questions was a vocabulary questions about the author's definitions of what reparation for slavery, what reparations meant. And the author stated in there that it is a compensation for work that they were not paid for. What I noticed was students were able to locate the author's definition, but the second part of the question asked them to then put it in their own words. And I found that they did not have a clear understanding of what compensation was. So I brought the whole class back together. We talked about the word compensation. We were able to identify what the base word was. They were able to look it up in the dictionary. And then from there, they were able to then create their own meaning for the word reparation based on their understanding of what compensation meant.
Excellent. Which behaviors from Core Action 3 did the students best exemplify in this lesson? What actions have you taken as a teacher to make that happen?
As far as being engaged and being able to work through a high-level text and have that deeper understanding, I made sure that, again, they had multiple access to the text. They had opportunities to work individually with partners in small groups. They were able to discuss, they were able to categorize, and so through that, all students had an opportunity to be fully engaged, and behaviors are pretty much a non-issue in the class because students are asked to work at a high level, and those that don't have the literacy skills for the high level are given enough support and scaffolding so that they can handle that high level text and feel confident with the work that they are producing.
All right. Well, we are down to 2 questions left. These ones should be relatively simple without notes. Great instructors are continuously learning. We want to understand what you celebrated in this lesson and what you'd improve upon. So reflecting on the lesson, what worked particularly well and what might you do differently? I have done Socratic discussions as one full group. I've noticed that when I have a large group, that those students that are very comfortable with the text and very high achieving and those kind of born leaders will dominate the discussion. And the students that aren't quite as confident kind of get lost in the discussion. And I've also noticed that the discussion goes too long and they lose interest. And able to have every student have an opportunity to participate, for 20 students, it takes too long and they begin to lose interest. So I've created the 2 small groups for the discussion so that they still have enough ideas that are being shared from other students, but it's small enough that we can control the length of the discussion so their interest stays high. And it also, the fact that I use the 4 pieces of candy for them to monitor how much they engage in the discussion. So I don't have those students that completely dominate the discussion. They have to choose their 4 choices carefully because once they're gone, they're gone. And then it also is a little incentive for my shyer students to want to engage. Also the fact that maybe they don't want to share within the text itself, but they have those 4 questions so they feel confident in asking a question because they don't have to know the answer, and they can rely on others to be able to find information to answer that question for them. Also with some of my below grade level students, being able to give them a specific section to work out of instead of the entire text. All right. Were there any surprises or unexpected student behaviors or reactions?
Not behaviors, but there were a couple things that came up during the discussion. This time I actually made a section at the bottom of the discussion ticket. I've asked them to have questions before, but unless that's actually put on there, they often don't fill it out. So we had a lot more questions, and we noticed that in our last class discussion, in the Socratic discussion, we didn't ask but maybe 1 question during the whole discussion. And so we had many more questions. So that was a great thing that I added that allowed for the questioning. Also, it is hard. Sometimes we forget what our students know, and we just think that they know as teachers. And so during the discussion, they were talking about how one of my groups was discussing about how President Jackson vetoed the reparations bill after the Civil War, and they didn't quite have the historical understanding of what was going on in the country at that time period with the end of the Civil War and the expense of bringing the country back together and rebuilding the South. And so they could cite that from the text, but I could tell through the reasoning that they didn't have a clear understanding of the historical significance of that time. And so I had to interject and give them that background knowledge, and then from there they were able to then make that connection and produce good reasoning to back up the claim of why it was vetoed. So through their discussions, it's important for me to, even though I have two different discussions going on, I have to make sure that I flow between them, because my job is as a facilitator, not as an instructor. And so where I see that they need that I need to make clarifications or add information, but not answer questions and not get into the discussion, but just be that person that clarifies if information is being shared incorrectly, or if I need to add more background knowledge so that a specific section that is cited, so they have a clearer understanding to go further in the discussion.
All right. Excellent interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
You rock.